Welcome back to the course of disaster management. I hope everybody is staying safe at homes. The last topic of disaster management, that is the multimedia technology in disaster risk management and training, that we will be discussing today. Particular topic will be divided into three videos, and the same will be posted to you. The first part of this topic deals with the challenges of disaster education. By the end of this video lecture, you will be able to list the challenges of disaster education and also list the advantages of ICT. So, the contents will be the briefing of ICT, the information and communication technologies, and followed by the challenges which we are facing in the disaster education, the demand side challenges and the supply side challenges. And finally, we'll close this video lecture with the advantages of the information and communication technologies. So, coming to the challenges of disaster education. Nowadays, the ICT tools have been widely used in disaster risk management. The usage of this ICT, it will enhance the country's preparedness and also the response to any calamity. Few examples of these ICT tools are the geographic information systems, the calamity sensor networks, early warning systems, wireless public safety infrastructures, the data processing and collection facilities. All these do come under this information and communication technologies. We can use this ICT in different stages of our disaster management cycle. There are different, we can take different illustrations of the role of ICT. We can take the latest example of Arogya Setu app. It is a mobile app, as you all know, which has been developed in the recent past by the central government in the wake of COVID-19. Like this, many other apps and different technologies have been developed so far by different agencies to alert the people or to warn the people or to improve the risk management due to any calamity. ICT tools are not only limited to development or usage of applications, it also includes different facilities which are generally employed by the governments or agencies to collect the information and process the information also. So, as you can see, the ICT applications in disaster risk reduction or the disaster risk management can be aligned to all the four phases of disaster cycle. As we know that the four cycles of disaster management are mitigation, preparedness, response and recovery. Now we will see an example for each of these phases, in what way the ICT tools can be aligned. We will see the first one, the mitigation phase. It is nothing but minimizing the effects of the disaster before onset. So, few examples of ICT applications in the mitigation phase are development of building codes and zoning and educating the people. These do come under the mitigation cycle, the mitigation phase. So, with this, we can try to minimize the effect of a disaster, educating the people through some sort of public addressing system, or by developing or by usage of an application, web application or mobile application. All these do come under mitigation process. And coming to the preparedness phase, which deals with our planning of how to respond to a disaster. We can have ICT tools for preparedness plans, for developing the preparedness plans, for doing some emergency exercises, and by showing some sort of early warning systems. All these do come under preparedness phases. And coming to the response, which are our efforts to minimize the hazards which are created by the disaster. So, all the search and rescue operations, the communication for this search and rescue operations, the mapping of this crisis, and passing out the information between the various agencies after the disaster, all these do come under a response phase. And finally, the recovery phase, the temporary housing and information passing to the people and providing medical care, all these do come under the ICT tools. So we can implement this information and communication technologies in any of the phases of the disaster management. Now, the biggest challenge for us, we will take the example of simple example of developing a mobile app, just as the case of Arogya Setu. Now the question arises how to implement or how to make this particular ICT tool widely operable by the people who are being affected by the disaster and the people who are trying to mitigate the disaster. So, we will face challenges for any ICT tool. When we are trying to develop an ICT tool, we do face challenges from both the demand side and also the supply side. Now, we will have a look into the demand side challenges. Now, as you can see, whenever you are trying to develop some sort of ICT tool, what we do expect, the people who are going to get benefited by this ICT tool, first of all, they must be exposed or they must be having some sort of basic knowledge on the risk which they are being exposed to and the necessary actions that can be taken to reduce their risk. So the people who are being exposed. See, the first point itself says that the demand side challenge, the first point is the people who are being exposed. They should have the basic knowledge on the risks and they must have a basic knowledge on the necessary actions on the risk and vulnerability to disasters. If they don't have any knowledge and whatever the ICT tool which we develop, it may not have any impact on them. And one more thing is that when we are trying to develop an ICT tool, we must take care that it must reach a maximum number of people. So the audience for this app or your application, it will be widely varying. See, there will be a huge amount of diversity. All the people will not be of the same fashion. So whatever the audience which you are targeting, let us suppose if you are developing an Arogya Setu app, once again, we will take the example of Arogya Setu app. The audience of this particular app will be the entire people of our country. As you all know, there is a huge diversity in the Indian population. They are of mixed people, mixed languages are there, many languages are there, many types of people are there. So we need to understand, we need to take care of how many people you are going to target and what is the diversity of the people you are going to target. Let us suppose if there are people who are speaking in 10 languages and you develop an app in one particular language, it may not reach to all of the people. So it will be a tough task for us. So you need to think about the diversity. That is first thing. The second thing is, and how many number of people you are going to target. Let us suppose you develop some sort of app and you keep a web browser which is capable, web server which can handle only up to 100 or 200 users at a single time. And if the app reaches out to many people, then what happens? The system gets hanged on. So you need to take care about the number of people and the diversity of the potential target audience. That is your second point in the demand side challenges. And the third one, integration of key players in the disaster management process. This is the most important thing. You try to integrate the key players into this ICT tool. See, let us suppose I am a common man. If I give some information, I have developed an application, and if I start giving publicity to that, who will listen? Nobody will listen. But if this application, if it is being accepted by the state government and the central government, and if I make some of these offices part of this application, then automatically what happens? Everybody starts believing it. So you need to integrate the key players, and how to integrate the key players, it is always the biggest challenge. So one of the biggest challenges is integration of key players into this disaster management process. And the fourth one is the different methods to reach, different knowledge to acquire for distinct key players with varying educational background. This is the most important thing, as already been discussed. Different educational backgrounds will be there. The people from the village may not be able to understand the app. We need to look into that before developing an application. And the last one. Nowadays, the entire paradigm has been shifting from post disaster to pre disaster. So, try to keep this thing in mind. Try to develop apps which deal with the pre disaster phase rather than with the post disaster phase, because nowadays the governments are focusing on pre disaster phase. So, these are all the challenges which we do face when we are developing or when we are trying to implement this ICT tools. And coming to the supply side challenges. Now, I being the designer, let us suppose. Now, what are my challenges now? From the countries are basically still relying on the traditional methods. This is the biggest problem. And there are no preparations and capacity for the countries to reach out to as many potential participants. In India, there is no problem for us. But in African countries, let us suppose, there are no preparations and capacity for the countries to reach out to as many potential participants. This is the biggest problem. And for the countries which do have a lower income, the limited capacity is the biggest problem. They can't spend too much amount of money. They don't have the proper knowledge of how to develop. So these are the biggest problems from the supply side. And few organizations or agencies to consolidate the knowledge of different disciplines as they relate to disaster risk management. This is the biggest problem. There are many disciplines when you are concerned with a disaster, and there are very few organizations which are trying to consolidate the knowledge of different disciplines. So these few people, they need to understand the different disciplines, and then they are supposed to forge all these things into a single app. And the fifth point is the most important point. Even having good in-house expertise, most universities lack training in practical knowledge. This is where even India is also has to focus. Lack of practical knowledge. This is the most important thing. The people who are just reading theory and they don't have any practical knowledge, and they are trying to develop different applications, but they are not reaching the audience, targeted audience. So unless you have a practical knowledge, it will be difficult for us to successfully implement any of these technologies. And particularly the disaster risk management program, it is to be widely adopted all over the universities, and so that each and every person tries to study this disaster risk management program. So as of now, there are very less universities which are offering this program. So these are the supply side challenges. And finally, we will close this video lecture with the advantages of ICT. As you can see, the ICT can change the way by which practitioners are trained in the disaster risk management. It adds both depth to training via multimedia simulations and by bringing in the best expertise. You can sit in the home and you can contact any people all across the world to get, and you can add these best expertise to your application. And it facilitates the knowledge exchanges and breadth via blending knowledge from various sectors. And it allows professionals working in risk management, disaster risk management, as well as in other areas to receive training without interruption of their current work. And it makes possible to significantly scale up training both in individual countries as well as at the regional and the global level. So the conclusions for this video lecture are: ICT is to be adopted for disaster risk management. It will surely enhance the country's preparedness and the response capacity to calamities. And it will surely change the way by which the practitioners are being trained in the disaster risk management. It will bring in more expertise across the globe. Thank you all.